Welcome back to Another World Audiobooks. Thank you guys for tuning in. Trying out my video setup here again and trying it in a big way because I recorded myself the entire time I was recording this episode, which the raw version is pretty ridiculous because I have to do takes and all that sort of thing. I think the actual version of it will also be a little ridiculous because I have to do cuts, a lot of cuts because I have a lot of takes that I do. So if you do want to see the magic getting made, I don't know, maybe I'll paste the raw version up on Patreon, although that might scare patrons off, so I'm not sure if I'll do that or not. If you want the raw version, let me know. Otherwise, I will keep it hidden and buried and never let it see the light of day. But the edited version will be available on Spotify video as well as on YouTube. And remember, if you're a patron, you are getting this early by several weeks, probably at this point. So we're getting a nice backlog for patrons there to enjoy, and we'll be getting them some extra content to enjoy. So if you want to become a patron, make sure to check that out. But yeah, video version of the podcast. We're giving it a shot. If you love it, I'd love to hear from you. If you hate it, I would love to hear from you as well. If you have any ideas as far as simple ways to make this happen, where I can edit audio and video at the same time and not have to try to piece them together afterwards, I would really appreciate that as well. Any tech gurus out there, please get in touch. anotherworldaudiobooks@gmail.com. And again, make sure to go to anotherworldaudiobooks.com where you can request your free audiobook. That is where I'm giving away a free audiobook. You can go check that out and request it anytime. That's what I do. I give away free audiobooks. So I hope you guys are enjoying the book so far. Without further ado, why don't we just jump right into the next chapter of Meet the Tiger. Chapter 12. Tea with Lapping. Agatha Gurton had not appeared at breakfast that morning, and when Patricia returned home to buckle into the task that the saint had entrusted to her, the housekeeper told her that the lady had gone out for a walk directly after lunch, without saying when she might be expected back. Miss Gurton often went for long tramps over the surrounding country, swinging a heavy stick and stepping out with the long, tireless stride of a veteran. In the light of her recently acquired knowledge, Patricia now realized that Miss Gurton had been growing more and more grim and taciturn of late, and that concurrently with the beginning of this moodiness, those walks had been growing more protracted and more frequent. The girl saw in this the evidence of Agatha Gurton's increasing anxiety. The woman was so masculine in all things that she might be expected, in the circumstances, to fall back on the typically masculine relief of strenuous physical effort to aid mental work, and at the same time to gain some peace of mind through sheer fatigue. But, though there was nothing astonishing or alarming in Agatha Gurton's hike, it was annoying because it prevented Patricia from carrying out her first promise to the saint. Miss Gurton might well stay out until dinner time, and then it would be too late to start any controversy, with the big appointment hanging in the background. However, that couldn't be cured, so the only thing to do was to get busy on the next specimen. Patricia found Lapping pottering about in his garden, arrayed in stained tweeds, coatless, bare-armed, with an ancient felt hat on the back of his head. He looked a picture of healthy, rustic, late middle age, and the expansive good humour with which he greeted her was in keeping with his appearance.
"My dear Miss Home, we haven't seen anything of you for far too long. How are you?"
"Splendid," she told him. "And you're looking younger than ever?" He shook his head with a whimsical smile.
"Flattery, my dear, base flattery. I'm an old man, and youth belongs to youth."
He peered quizzically at her in his short-sighted fashion.
"What chance have I got for your favour against that dashing young hero of the pill-box? No, you must leave me to my years."
"But I want to talk to you, Sir Michael," she said, smiling back. "Can't I even come inside the gate?"
"Temptress," he teased. "You're a witch, but I'm too old and dusty to be vamped even by you."
But he threw down the trowel, wiped his hands on his trousers, and opened the gate for her. It was not a strain to take the saint's advice and treat Lapping as a sort of honorary uncle. His manner invited it. He was one of those rare and lovable neuters, of kindly wisdom and broad human sympathies, who are invariably adopted as honorary uncles by such sweet young things as Patricia. He had never married. Perhaps he was too essentially safe and comfortable and tolerant for any woman to choose him as a partner in such a wild adventure as matrimony.
"And when do we congratulate you?"
he asked, pursuing the role of his privilege.
"There could hardly be a better match. Young Templars exciting enough to make any maiden heart beat faster."
It was no less than she could have wished. He saved her the trouble of leading up to the subject.
"I was just going to ask you what you thought of it," she remarked.
"Then may I first make the conventional felicitations?"
"Not yet. I came to ask your opinion, to help me decide."
"But surely your aunt is the proper person."
"I've already asked her. Now I want your advice as well."
He tilted the battered trilby further over his ear.
"This is a horrible responsibility to have thrust upon one,"
he complained.
"Even the aged and presumably wise have been known to err in their verdicts upon the rising generation. Still, if you insist. Well, the first objection you must face is that every other woman he meets will want to take him away from you. Dark, daredevil, romantic fire-eaters like him are scarce these days, and the few there are can take their pick. Not that I don't thoroughly agree with his choice, but—"
"Perhaps," she suggested sweetly, "there might be a quite averagely nice man who would want to take me away from Mr. Templar. I don't want to seem conceited, but you can't have it all your way."
He stared, then laughed.
"That's a point of view,"
he admitted.
"Now, let's go and sit in the shade and be serious," she pleaded. "And just when we're nearly coming to blows, you can give me some tea and I shall collapse."
They walked over to a couple of wicker chairs that stood under a tree at the side of the house.
"Are you really serious?"
he questioned as they settled themselves. She nodded.
"Absolutely. And you're so old and clever, I'm sure you can help."
He grimaced.
"You needn't rub in the patriarchal part,"
he said,
"though I admit it myself. But you may spread yourself on the subject of my first-class brain. And what am I to say? I know less about young Templar than you do."
"People say all sorts of things about him."
Lapping looked reproachful.
"Was there ever a village that didn't say all sorts of things about inhabitants who weren't utterly commonplace? And rumours even spring up about the most prosaic people."
She shook her head.
"It's all rumour," she said.
Then, as Simon had recommended, she told the whole story of the previous night's events, omitting very little. She told him about Bittle's amazing announcement and ultimatum, and about Agatha Girton's confirmation of the millionaire's statement. She dwelt at length on the saint's irregular behaviour, and on the curious incident at Carnes, but she did not mention the saint's parting warning. Watching his face, she saw only a slight smile, as of a mellowed elder making allowances for the irresponsibility and supercharged imagination of youth, and that comprehensive tolerance hardly changed as she piled mystery upon mystery and thrill upon thrill. But for the warning which the saint had drilled into her to trust nobody, she would have accepted Lapping as honorary uncle in all sincerity, without hesitation. It was almost impossible to believe that this congenial, simple-minded, clean-looking man could be an associate of the Tigers. But then it was almost as hard to realize that he possessed one of the keenest legal brains of his day, and that those pleasant brown features had assumed the inexorable mask of justice, and the same lips that smiled so avuncularly now had pronounced sentence of death upon many men. Presently her recital finished, and she was waiting for his response. He pulled a flowery bandana from his pocket and blew his nose loudly, and then he turned to her with twinkling grey eyes.
"It's certainly got the makings of a good story,"
he confessed calmly.
"But it happened," she insisted, "all in a few hours, last night. Surely you must see that there's something queer in the wind. There's some foundation to those rumours, but there's always the chance that the gossips have got hold of the wrong end of the stick. Do you think Mr. Templar's a detective?"
He shrugged.
"Who am I to say? Do detectives behave like that except in detective stories?"
She played crestfallen, looking at him appealingly.
"You must know a lot about detectives, and if you say they don't, then I suppose he's a crook. But I can't believe that."
"If a crook couldn't convince people that he was honest,"
Lapping pointed out,
"he'd have to give up the game and go into the workhouse."
"But Mr. Templar's different."
"They always are,"
said Lapping cynically. But a mocking spray of wrinkles remained creased up at the corners of his eyes, and his mouth was still half smiling. That wasn't the way a man who wanted to blacken another in the eyes of an infatuated girl would go about it. She challenged him.
"You're still ragging," she accused, "and I wish you wouldn't. Please, be solemn, just for a minute."
"But what's the use?"
he temporized.
"In any case, either you love him already, or you don't. Which is it?"
"I do,"
she answered defiantly.
He made a gesture of humorous despair.
If that's true, nothing anyone can say will change you. The law is taken out of my hands. If I say I believe in him, you'll fall on my neck and say how wise I am to see deeper than everybody else. If I say I don't believe in him and advise you to give him up, you'll call me a spiteful old fool and rush off and fall on his neck and tell him that you don't care what the rest of the world says. So, what can I do?
Just give me your honest opinion. What would you advise me to do if I were your daughter, for instance?
He winced.
Still harping on my grey hairs?
He protested.
However, shall we stick to our former argument? You love him, and that's all there is to be said. I've had a lot of experience of lawbreakers, and unofficially, I'm broad-minded about them. There are only 3 kinds of criminal. The first is the small sneak thief who's been brought up to it from childhood. He's petty, whining or bullying according to size, and he spends most of his life in prison, but to him that's part of the game. Obviously, Templar doesn't fall into that category. The second type is the clever man with a kink. He does fairly well for himself, till one day he makes a slip and ends up in the dock. He may be bred to it like the first kind, or he may drift into crime because he thinks he sees bigger rewards for his cleverness there than in legitimate professions. But he's a coward and a snake, and obviously again that lets Templar out. The distinction's rather a fine one, but I think you can put it that the worst kink in type the second is that he can't laugh like a completely sane man. And Templar's got such a refreshingly boyish sense of humour. The third and last type is the Raffles. He's common in fiction, but he only occurs once in a blue moon outside a novelist's imagination. He does it more than anything for the thrill. Templar might be that quite easily, but that kind is always clean, and if he loves you, you've nothing to worry about. So, suppose we agree that's the worst we can say about him, and we can even excuse some of that on the grounds of youthful high spirits and an impetuous desire for adventure. Are you satisfied?
Lapping had delivered this discourse in a kindly and charitable way, such as a man might use who had seen too much of the world to judge anyone hastily, and who understood enough to be able to pardon much, and Patricia found it hard to doubt his sincerity. Still, she had a card or two yet to play, and she did not intend to let the saint down by allowing herself to be too easily won.
"You're a wonderful help, Sir Michael," she said. "You've more or less expressed what I feel myself. It's a comfort to know that I'm not alone in my lunacy."
"I think, though," he warned her, "you ought to ask the young man to give his own explanation. If he trusts you, and if he's the type I gather he is, he'll make a clean breast of it all. Hasn't he told you anything about himself?"
She was instantly on her guard.
"What sort of things?"
she countered, and he showed surprise that she should ask such a question.
"Well, things. He can't have expected you not to be at all curious about the reason for these extraordinary goings-on."
"He just told me I must be patient and believe in him. He said it would be dangerous for me to know too much, but that once it was all cleared up, and the enemy was out of the way, he'd be able to explain it all."
"And who is this mysterious enemy?"
"Mr. Templar calls him the Tiger. I don't know why."
Lapping knitted his brows for a time in thought.
"I seem to recognize the nickname," he said. "Wait a minute. Wasn't there a sensation in the papers some time ago? A Chicago gang called the Tiger Cubs had broken a bank and escaped with an enormous sum of money and gold. Something of the sort."
She kept her face perfectly blank.
"I can't remember," she said. "It doesn't convey anything to me."
"I can't place it on the spur of the moment, but I'm certain it was something like that. But a Chicago gang leader in Bacon? That sounds rather far-fetched."
"I know it does,"
she granted ruefully.
"But so do some of the true things I've told you this afternoon."
His hand just touched her arm. He smiled again, his frequent friendly smile that was so nearly irresistible even to her newborn suspicion of everything and everybody. But one thing checked her impulse to believe in him and look for enemies elsewhere. She was looking into his face, and she would have sworn that there lurked in his eyes a glimmer of suppressed amusement.
"Then, shall we give it up?"
he said.
"We could argue for hours and get no further. All you can do is to possess your soul in patience. Sooner or later, events will prove whether your intuition is right or wrong, and then you will be able to make your decision with a clearer vision. Meanwhile, you can only act as your heart dictates. There's a trite and priggish piece of sentimental moralizing for you, but what else can an old fogey offer?"
"You're too silly," she laughed. "I'm awfully grateful."
"Then, having temporarily settled the fate of the greatest romance in history, what about the tea you promised yourself?"
She thanked him, and he rose and went into the house to give the order and tidy himself up. She was glad of the respite, for she was finding it a strain to obey the saint's injunction and maintain the pose of a kind of cross between a sleuth, a conspirator, and a fugitive with a price on their head. And Lapping, after so obligingly leading the conversation into the path she wanted it to follow, had given her no help at all. He was very winning and benevolent, and quite at his ease. All her baiting of the trap and stealthily stalking of her quarry had yielded not a trace of a guilty conscience. But there was still the disturbing matter of his amusement to account for. She had an uncomfortable and exasperating feeling that he was quietly making fun of her, that her crude and clumsy attempts to make him give himself away afforded him a secret, malicious delight. He had given nothing away, and that fact only reinforced her growing belief that he had something to give if he chose to do so. It was a disconcerting realization to have to face, that Lapping had read through her studied innocence and seen her for nothing more or less than the emissary of the saint, and that he was simply playing with her. Would any law-abiding man, however tolerant, have been quite so broad-minded? She began to doubt it, while she had to admit that her grounds for doing so were very flimsy. If Lapping were high up in the tiger cubs, he would be a clever man, and a clever man would know that to try to turn her against the saint would immediately arouse suspicion of his motives. Whereas, by taking the saint's part, he might hope to inveigle her into regarding him as a potential ally. But how could an ex-judge, most of whose life had been led in the glaring light of publicity, have managed to enter such a gang as the Tigers? Her brain reeled in a dizzy maze of impossible theories, of profound subtleties and super-crafty counter-subtleties. If Lapping were in league with the tiger, and had seen through her, how high would he be likely to rate her intelligence? For, according to that rating, he would be skillfully gauging her psychological reactions to his insidious attack, so that on the very points where she thought he had betrayed himself, he would have fooled her into making exactly the deductions he wanted her to make. And to beat him at that game, she would have to be just a shade cleverer than he gave her credit for being. And how clever was that? For the first time, she got an insight into the true deadly technique of the sport she had taken up so light-heartedly. Now, Lapping emerged from the house, carrying a folding table. Behind him followed his housekeeper with a tray of tea things. For an instant, Patricia was seized with panic. Suppose Lapping were one of the tiger cubs, even the tiger himself, and had discovered her object and decided to remove her. The tea could be drugged, cakes could be poisoned. She choked back an impulse to rush away, forcing herself to think of Simon. What would the saint have done in the circumstances? Well, for a start, he'd never have allowed them to arise. But how would he face them if they had arisen? She compelled herself to deal logically with her fear, and the answer came. Whatever Lapping might be, and however much he suspected, he wouldn't dare to do anything to her just then, because of the possibility that the saint might be keeping an eye on the proceedings, watching and waiting to see if Lapping would fall for the temptation and so incriminate himself. The answer was sound. Patricia relaxed, and greeted Lapping with a friendly smile when he arrived.
"I feel I've given you a lot of trouble,"
she apologized. He waved her excuses.
"Not at all, my dear Miss Home. It's a pleasure, and the trouble is negligible. For a bachelor, I'm very domesticated, and dispensing tea is one of my social assets."
He was genial and unreserved. The secret amusement which she had noticed was no longer evident. Either he had ceased to see the funny side of the situation, or his pleasure in it had become too great to show. She found herself again falling under the spell of his avuncular bonhomie, and the memory of that half-hidden mockery in his eyes continued to bother her. Wouldn't a man with nothing to conceal have showed his amusement openly if he found anything comic in being appealed to for advice on such a matter? What other explanation could there be, except the one that Lapping was playing a shrewd game? Perhaps the saint would know. The bare facts must be placed in his possession at once, for Patricia felt that she was hopelessly out of her depth. She ate and drank sparingly, praying for the earliest moment at which she could take her leave without seeming in too great a hurry. Lapping, either ignoring her perturbation or failing to see any signs of it, chatted pleasantly. Patricia did her best to keep up the part she was playing. She must have done it successfully, for he appeared pained and surprised when she made a tentative move to gather up her belongings.
"Must you leave me so soon?"
"I've promised to see my aunt before dinner," she said. "There's some business to talk over. Something about my investments. It's an awful bore, but the letter's got to be written tonight so that it can go off first thing in the morning."
It was amazing what a fluent and convincing liar she had become of a sudden.
"Needless to say, I'm heartbroken,"
he vowed, pressing her hand.
"But perhaps I can hope that you'll come again. I'll talk as seriously as you want me to. I think I can understand your difficulty, and perhaps, with all due respect to Miss Girton, I'm the best qualified person in Bakem to advise you. Perhaps you could even arrange to bring Mr. Templar with you. He needn't know that I have your confidence."
"I'll try to get him to see you,"
she averred truthfully.
"I'd be delighted. I'm very idle, and I hate ceremony, so we don't have to bother about a formal invitation. Just drop in without notice. You'll find me at your service."
She thanked him, and he escorted her to the gate. She had just passed through it when an inspiration struck her, and the blow staggered her, so desperate and daring was the idea. But she carried it out before she had time to falter.
"By the way," she said, "how's Harry the Duke?"
The question sprang to her lips so artlessly and naturally, so apropos of nothing that they had been talking about for a long time, that she could not have contrived it better to take him off his guard. She was watching his face keenly, knowing how much depended on his reaction, but not a muscle twitched, and his eyes did not change. She was studying those intently, well aware that the expression of the eyes is a hard thing for even the most masterly bluffer to control. He looked surprised, thought for a second.
"Why, whatever makes you ask that?"
he inquired in frank bewilderment.
"Simon, Mr. Templar, mentioned that you'd once sentenced a dangerous criminal of that name, and he said he thought the man might make an attempt on your life."
He nodded.
"Yes, I remember. Templar said as much to me the first time we met. Harry the Duke swore from the dock that he'd get even with me, but I've heard the same threat several times, and I'm still alive, and it hasn't spoiled my sleep."
Patricia made her escape as soon after that as she could. She had to confess herself utterly baffled. However Lapping had behaved earlier in the afternoon, his response to that startling question of hers could not have been more open or more genuine. The name of Harry the Duke conveyed nothing more to Lapping than a crook he had sent to prison in the course of his duty. She would have given her oath for it. He had been unaffectedly taken off his guard, and yet there had been no vestige of fear or suspicion in his puzzlement. Could a guilty man have accomplished such a feat, even if he were the most consummate actor that was ever born? The girl felt a crying need for Simon Templar's superior knowledge and acuter judgment. She was helpless, beaten. But for the amusement she had detected in Lapping's eyes, she would not have hesitated to acquit him. Even now she was strongly impelled to do so, in the light of developments subsequent to that, and she was casting around for some theory that would eliminate any malevolent motive, and still account satisfactorily for the indisputable fact that he had seen at once what she had been driving at, and had calmly and effectively refused to allow himself to be inveigled into saying any more than he chose to say. But then, the realization only came to her with stunning conviction when she was walking up the drive to the manor. If Lapping were blameless, then the only person who could be the tiger was Agatha Girton. Okay, again, this was a big experiment doing this video version, so hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please, again, get in touch with me. I would love to hear from you and know whether it's worth it for me to do the video version. It does take quite a bit of extra time and effort, so if you don't like it or if you don't care, get in touch with me. If you do like it and you do care, please get in touch with me so that I know one way or the other, because I just want to make this podcast the best that it can be for you, all the listeners and viewers now. Listeners and viewers, kind of crazy. Let's see, we got our vocabulary corner. We're going to jump right into a French word, apropos, which means fitting and to the point. So basically it's something that's relevant. Apropos, that's a good one. I've heard that before, but I don't think I'd ever seen it written. I just heard people talk about it. So, apropos. The next is aver. Aver, there we go. All right, to affirm positively. I think we had that one in Meet the Tiger already, but I'd forgotten what it was already. So, can you tell that I have kids? So aver. So averring means to basically affirm positively or declare. Saying amen, you can aver things. And then avuncular, this is another word I've heard before, but I probably couldn't have told you what it meant, but it basically means just having to do with an uncle. So it's regarding as characteristic of an uncle, especially in benevolence or tolerance of or pertaining to an uncle, which that's just not a word that I don't think you would have much use for in day-to-day life necessarily, avuncular, but it's a good one to have in your back pocket just in case. We got quite a few words here today. Another one, bonhomie, which means a pleasant and affable disposition or geniality. Bonhomie, that's a really good noun. And then inveigle, there we go. It's like bagel. Inveigle means to win over by coaxing flattery or artful talk. I love that one. Inveigle. Are you trying to inveigle me right now? I'm trying to inveigle you to subscribe to the podcast, that is for sure. And then the last one that I really liked was priggish. So not pig and not not piggish, priggish. It means to be like a prig, conceited or pragmatical. So, yeah, that's a word. So basically is something that is like a prig, which prig means a person who demonstrates an exaggerated conformity or propriety, especially in an irritatingly arrogant or smug manner. The word onomatopoeia basically refers to a word that sounds like what it is. Prig or priggish definitely, I would say, is an onomatopoeia. So anyway, hope you guys enjoy this crazy experiment with the video stuff. My webcam is here and my computer screen is here. So if it looks like I'm not looking at the screen, at the camera sometimes, it's because of that. So if anyone knows how to fix that, I would also love how to, I don't know, you watch people on YouTube and you see them do things, you're like, how do you do that? And you can Google a lot of things, and you can find out a lot of things through Google, but there's some things that are very hard to Google. So if anybody knows how to address that issue of me looking at the camera, being able to look at the screen at the same time, I would love that piece of advice as well. So anyway, thanks guys for listening and supporting the show. If you've hung around until this long with all my ramblings, I appreciate it. And yeah, please get in touch if you liked the video version. If you don't care about the video version, I would love to hear from you either way. If you think it's a value add, or if you think it's detracting, or if you think I'm just talking about it too much, whatever, I'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch, anotherworldaudiobooks@gmail.com. Thanks guys for listening, and we will catch you next week.